With bagpipes, whiskey, and heaps of haggis, is there any tradition that embodies Scotland's culture more perfectly than Burns Night? If you're new to Scotland, you might be unfamiliar with this iconic national custom and may mistakenly believe it's an evening dedicated to roasting your friends and family. It's not. So to help you familiarize yourself with Burns Night in this video, I, the Charismatic Traveler, will tell you everything you need to know about this annual Scottish celebration. Before getting into what Burns Night is all about, we first need to dive into the history of the man after whom it was named. Robert Burns is someone worth remembering, for this man was widely considered the national bard of Scotland, just as Shakespeare's was England's. Born in poverty and in a world of manual labour, Rabbie, as his friends called him, soon developed an affinity for writing, especially when he saw the effects it had on the ladies, if you know what I mean. And at the young age of 15, he already began putting pen to paper to create his very first feats of poetry. Written in both English and Scots and inspired by the hardship of his farming life, his works are imbued with multiple themes, such as patriotism, liberalism, class inequalities, gender roles and justice, and most of all, Scottish cultural identity, all of which still find their significance to this day. Decades after his first scriptures, Robert Burns amassed an impressive list of illegitimate children. Yes, that too. 12 of them to be exact, but that's off topic. I meant to say an impressive list of literary accomplishments, having written hundreds of poems and songs that would eventually be celebrated nationwide. He also was quite the shagger. Some of his most notorious pieces include the reworked folk song Auld Lang Syne that would thenceforth be traditionally sung every Hogmanay. There's also what some consider his absolute masterpiece, the narrative poem known as Tam O'Shanter, which some say might have even influenced the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And bonus fact, the notorious Scottish cap we call the Tammy was also named after the eponymous hero of Burns' poem. You get the idea, Burns' legacy is one that truly left a mark in history. But it's only after a short lifetime filled with literary success, debts, and numerous affairs that this poet's fascinating existence came to an end. For it's in 1796, at only 37 years old, that old Rabbie passed away.
Old
5 years later, in 1801, his friends came together at the old Burns cottage to feast and celebrate in the memory of their departed friend. And that's when the first ever Burns supper was born. Soon after this initial gathering, it was decided that the next supper would take place on the poet's birthday, on the 25th of January, which thenceforth marked the annual Burns Night celebration. And while Burns suppers can also be hosted all year round, they traditionally follow all the same general rituals from that very first supper at Burns Cottage 250 years ago. Let's run through a typical structure. The evening begins with the arrival of the guests, who are welcomed by the jolly melodies of a bagpipe. Then the host enunciates a few words before reciting the Selkirk Grace, a Scots prayer that kicks off the supper. We begin small with a starter dish, typically a Scottish soup like a Scotch broth, or my personal favourite, call it skink. Table 5, please. But then comes the real deal. Just as we piped in the guests earlier, we do the same with arguably the real star of the evening, the main course, the one, the only, the haggis. Traditionally served with neeps and tatties, the haggis resembles a fat sausage, stuffed with a mixture of onions, oatmeal, some seasonings, and of course the main ingredient, minced meat, although you can easily find vegetarian alternatives. And don't forget the whiskey to wash it all down. When the haggis is brought, it's with the utmost respect. All guests rise as this delectable dish is carried on a silver platter, accompanied by the bagpiper, the chef, and the person who will then recite the address to a haggis. This entire performance is the highlight of the evening, as the chosen person recites the text and on cue dramatically cuts open the haggis with a sharpened knife. At the end of the poem, a toast of whiskey is then proposed to the haggis, and then begins the main course. Sláinte. When the meal eventually concludes, a speech and a toast are made to the immortal memory of Robert Burns. What's that I hear? It's missing a little something? Whiskey, of course, because this toast is followed by two others, one to the lassies in the room, and the second, a humorous response from the lassies to the lads. And finally, the evening ends with singing and reading of Burns' work, with the occasional ceilidh thrown in the mix. And don't forget the Water of Life, that's the Gaelic name for whiskey. If you want to get a taste of what Scotland is really about, attending a Burn supper should be at the top of your list, for this time of merriment, poetry, and music embodies all the hearty soul of Scottish culture. On that note, if you enjoyed the video, you know the jazz, like, share, and subscribe. This was the Charismatic Traveler, and I'll see you in the next video.